Cowboy rode through fire to save the Apache woman, a deadly race against Venom and fate. The sun rose slowly over the dusty horizon, painting the Arizona desert in shades of gold and orange. Luke Harper, a rugged cowboy with a weathered hat and a determined look, walked slowly toward the stable. His horse, a strong chestnut stallion named Thunder, neighed softly as he approached. Bah! Luke ran his rough hand over the horse's mane, feeling the warmth of the early morning sun and the strength of his companion. Life on the frontier was hard, but Luke had learned to face it with patience and quiet courage. He had grown used to the solitude of the desert, finding peace in its wide-open spaces and the soft sounds of the wind through the dry grass. Luke's days were simple, but full. He tended to a small herd of horses, checked the fences, and rode the trails around the settlement. Though he lived alone, he felt a connection to the land. Every hill, every river bend, every rocky cliff seemed familiar, almost like old friends. He had been raised here, and he knew the secrets the desert kept. The sun could be merciless, and the nights could bring freezing cold. But Luke had learned to survive, to read the signs of the weather, and to understand the animals around him. His life was not easy, but it was honest, and he respected the balance of the world he lived in. Not far from Luke's ranch lived the Apache people. Among them was a young woman named Ayoka. She was strong and proud, with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. Ayoka knew the desert as well as Luke did. She could track animals, find water in dry places, and heal the sick using herbs and knowledge passed down through generations. Though she lived close to the settlers, she often stayed apart, keeping her own path. Luke had seen her from a distance many times. He admired her courage and skill, though he respected the boundaries that separated them. There was a quiet understanding between them, born out of mutual respect rather than words. On this particular morning, the wind carried an unusual scent. Luke paused, sniffing the air. Smoke. Not far from the edge of the canyon, he could see a thin line of gray rising into the sky. Fires were common in the desert, especially in late summer, but something about this one felt dangerous. He frowned, tightening his grip on the reins. The fire was growing quickly, and the dry grass and scrub would feed it fast. Luke had seen too many fires start small and turn into disasters. He needed to find the source before it spread. Best. Without a second thought, he mounted Thunder and started riding toward the smoke, moving carefully along the dusty trail. Ayoka was already nearby, though she did not know the fire would threaten her. She had wandered into the canyon to collect herbs for her people. Her basket was full, and she moved quickly, alert to every sound. She loved the quiet of the desert, the way the wind whispered through the rocks, and the songs of birds hidden in the cliffs. But today, the peace was broken. The smoke was faint but growing, curling through the canyon like a living creature. Ayoka paused, her sharp eyes narrowing. Fire was dangerous, especially in a place so dry and full of flammable grass. She considered leaving, but the herbs were needed. Her people relied on her, and she had promised to bring them the medicine. Luke rode closer, his horse moving steadily but carefully. He kept his eyes on the smoke and on the canyon trails, knowing that danger could hide anywhere. The desert was not forgiving. A wrong step, a sudden collapse of a cliff, or a snakebite could end a life in moments. Luke had learned to stay alert, to trust his instincts, and to act without hesitation. As he neared the canyon, he caught sight of a figure moving quickly among the rocks.
At first he thought it might be an animal, but then he saw the woman's long dark hair and the determined way she moved. It was Ayoka.
His heart tightened with concern. She was heading straight toward the rising smoke. Ayoka sensed something too. The wind had shifted, carrying the scent of fire to her nose. Beck. She froze, looking around, realizing the danger. She could see the smoke curling higher, growing darker. Bah.
Her basket of herbs weighed down her arm, but she did not want to leave it behind. Every plant in that basket was valuable. Medicine for her people.
But even as she debated, she noticed Luke riding toward her, his horse moving fast. Relief washed over her face for a moment, but fear stayed in her eyes. Desperation. She knew that fire could change directions quickly. One moment a path could be safe, and the next, it could be deadly. Luke slowed his horse as he approached, trying to judge the safest way forward. "Hyoka!" he called, his voice steady but urgent. "You need to get out of here. The fire is spreading faster than you think." She looked up, startled, but did not move immediately. Bess. She shook her head slightly, indicating she could not leave the herbs behind. Luke's heart sank. He knew what she was thinking. She was brave, but the desert and fire did not forgive bravery when it ignored caution. He dismounted and ran toward her, careful with every step as the dry grass crackled beneath his boots. "Listen to me,"
he said firmly.
"You can't stay here. Come with me, now."
"We'll get the herbs later, but right now you need to live."
Ahioka hesitated. Her eyes searched the canyon, calculating, measuring every rock and shadow. Luke could see the conflict in her expression. Duty versus survival, rest. Finally, she nodded slightly, understanding the urgency. Together they moved quickly, Luke leading Thunder to create a clear path through the dry grass and brush. Every second mattered. The fire was spreading and the smoke was thickening, making it harder to see. Luke's mind raced, thinking of every possible danger. Falling rocks, snakes, the fire itself. As they moved, Luke noticed small rattlesnakes slithering away from the heat. He warned Ahioka, keeping close to her, making sure she did not step where danger waited. The desert was alive with hazards, and they were racing against time. Despite the fear, there was a rhythm to their movement, a connection between them. Both were skilled in their own ways, and they instinctively understood each other. The wind carried the scent of smoke and ash, and Luke felt the heat growing on his face. Every breath was heavy with smoke, but he forced himself to stay calm, to stay focused. By now, the fire was closer, flames licking at the edges of the canyon. Luke knew they could not stop. They had to keep moving. Ahioka held tightly to her basket, the herbs almost forgotten in the urgency. Bye. She stumbled once, but Luke caught her hand, steadying her. They shared a glance, a silent promise. They would survive, no matter the danger. But Luke climbed back onto Thunder, motioning for Ahioka to follow. She did, trusting him completely. The fire crackled louder, and the smoke thickened, but they pushed forward, determined to reach safety. As they moved, Luke's mind reflected on the strange twists of life. He had faced many dangers before, storms, wild animals, bandits. But this was different. This was nature itself, unpredictable and deadly, testing courage, skill, and quick thinking. And yet, despite the fear, he felt a strange calm. He knew they could survive if they stayed together and trusted each other. Ahioka's quiet bravery matched his own determination. They were a team, facing a challenge that neither could overcome alone. By mid-morning, the smoke had grown thick, and the fire was spreading rapidly. The desert seemed alive with heat, flames dancing across the dry grass, and the wind shifting unpredictably. Luke guided Thunder with precision, moving between safe paths, avoiding snakes and fallen branches. Ahioka kept close, following every instruction, trusting Luke completely. Though the danger was real, there was a strange beauty in the chaos. The glowing orange flames, the rising smoke, the strength of life that refused to be overcome. They were alive, moving through danger, relying on skill, courage, and mutual trust. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, they reached a small, rocky outcrop away from the fire. The smoke was still heavy and the heat still pressed against them, but here they were safe for now. Luke dismounted, helping Ahyoka down from the horse. She looked at him, gratitude shining in her eyes but still holding her basket tightly. He nodded, understanding. Bay had survived the first test, but they both knew this was only the beginning. The fire was still out there, the desert still dangerous, and their journey was far from over. Luke and Ahyoka stood for a moment, catching their breath, listening to the crackling of the distant flames. The sun burned high in the sky, casting long shadows over the canyon. Life in the desert was never easy, and today had reminded them of its unforgiving nature. But it had also shown them something important. Courage, trust, and determination could carry them through even the most dangerous situations. Together, they were ready to face whatever came next. The smoke from the fire grew thicker as Luke and Ahyoka looked across the canyon. Flames. Flames licked the dry grass, moving quickly with the wind, leaving a trail of destruction in their path. Luke's heart pounded as he scanned the area. He knew the fire could change direction at any moment, and the canyon was filled with narrow paths, rocks, and hidden dangers. Every second counted. Bay. He could see that Ahyoka's path back to her tribe was blocked by the blaze. And even worse, the dry desert around them was home to snakes and other threats that would not wait for them to escape. The urgency of the moment pressed on him, and he realized he had to act fast. Ahyoka gripped her basket of herbs tightly, her hands trembling slightly. She had never been afraid of fire before, but this was different. The flames were close, and the wind pushed them unpredictably, making the air thick and hot. Smoke burned her lungs, and the heat pressed against her skin. She glanced at Luke, seeing the determination in his eyes. He was calm, but ready to do whatever it took to save her. Despite her fear, she trusted him. She had no choice but to follow. Luke looked at the terrain ahead. The safest path was through a narrow section where the fire burned less fiercely, but it was still dangerous. There were rocks and dry bushes everywhere, and the smell of smoke made it hard to breathe.
Luke mounted Thunder without hesitation, motioning for Ahyoka to hold on.
She swung herself onto the horse behind him, clutching him tightly. Thunder snorted and stepped carefully, feeling the heat of the fire and the dry grass beneath his hooves. Luke whispered calm words to the horse, guiding it along a path that was as safe as he could make it under the circumstances. The first step into the fire was terrifying. Flames crackled and roared as they moved closer, and the heat felt like a wall against their faces. Smoke filled their lungs, making it hard to breathe, but Luke pushed forward, keeping his focus on the path ahead. Ahyoka held her breath and closed her eyes for a moment, trusting Luke to keep them safe.
Every movement was careful, measured, and precise.
They could not afford a mistake. A misstep could mean falling into the fire or stepping on a snake hidden in the dry grass. Luke's mind raced, calculating every move, every risk, as Thunder moved steadily through the dangerous terrain. As they advanced, Luke noticed movement in the smoke. Several rattlesnakes were fleeing from the fire, slithering quickly across the ground. Luke tensed, knowing how dangerous they could be. He nudged Thunder to the side, avoiding a snake that crossed their path, and shouted warnings to Ahyoka, telling her to lift her feet and watch carefully.
She obeyed, staying close to Luke and keeping her balance on the horse.
The air was filled with the smell of burning grass and ash, and the sounds of the fire crackling were deafening. It was a test of courage, skill, and instinct. They moved quickly but carefully, racing against time. Luke could feel the sweat running down his face, stinging his eyes as he squinted through the smoke. Ahioka's heart raced with fear and excitement. She had never experienced anything so dangerous, yet she felt a strange trust and connection with Luke. They were united in this moment, each depending on the other for survival. Luke's hand was steady on the reins, and Ahioka held on tight, their bond forming under the pressure of life and death. Suddenly, a snake struck at them. It was quick, moving with lightning speed. Luke reacted immediately, nudging Thunder to the side and lifting Ahioka slightly to avoid the strike. The horse jumped over a small rock, narrowly avoiding another snake. Luke's heart pounded, adrenaline rushing through his veins. He realized that every step forward was a challenge, and the danger was not just from the fire. The desert itself seemed alive, testing them at every moment. Yet he did not falter. Bam! He kept moving, guiding Thunder through the chaos with skill and determination.
Ahioka gasped as a flame burst close to them, the heat scorching her face.
She closed her eyes briefly, but did not let go of Luke. She knew that panic could be deadly, and she focused on trusting him. Luke encouraged her with a few quiet words, reminding her to stay calm and steady. Every second felt like a lifetime as they navigated through the narrow path, avoiding falling branches, rocks, and snakes. The fire roared louder, and smoke made it hard to see, but Luke's focus never wavered. He knew that hesitation could cost them everything. The path grew steeper, and the fire spread more quickly along the canyon walls. Luke noticed that some rocks had fallen, creating obstacles they had to maneuver around. He guided Thunder carefully, lifting the horse's hooves over fallen debris and telling Ahioka when to adjust her position. Each step was dangerous, but Luke's experience and calm presence kept them moving forward. Ahioka's hands were sweaty, her heart racing, but she trusted Luke completely. They were moving together, each relying on the other to survive. As they reached a bend in the canyon, Ahioka stumbled slightly, her foot slipping on loose gravel. Luke reacted immediately, steadying her hand and whispering instructions. Thunder shifted his weight, keeping them balanced, and Luke guided them safely through the tricky section. The fire was close, and the heat pressed against their bodies, but they pushed onward. Ahioka looked at Luke with admiration and trust, seeing the courage and quick thinking that kept them alive. Every movement was deliberate, and every choice mattered. Suddenly, a snake lunged from under a bush, biting Ahioka's ankle. She cried out in pain, and Luke reacted instantly. He lifted her foot, assessing the bite quickly.
"It's okay," he said firmly, trying to calm her. "We need to keep moving, but I'll treat it as soon as we're safe." Ahioka gritted her teeth, feeling the sting and heat from the venom, but she stayed strong.
Luke guided Thunder carefully, helping her maintain balance despite the pain. The desert was unforgiving, but they were determined to survive together. They moved with renewed urgency, aware that the fire could block their path at any moment. Luke's mind raced, thinking of every possible danger and the quickest way to safety.
Ahioka focused on staying with him, trusting his decisions and courage.
The fire roared around them, sending sparks into the air and smoke into their lungs. The heat pressed on them, but they did not falter. They were united in their goal, to survive and escape the deadly flames and venomous snakes. Finally, after what felt like endless minutes of tension, they reached a safer section of the canyon. The fire was still behind them, and the smoke still thick, but the immediate danger had lessened. Luke guided Thunder to a rocky clearing, helping Ahioka dismount carefully. Her ankle throbbed, but she was alive. Luke examined the bite quickly, using knowledge he had learned from the desert to slow the venom. He tore strips of cloth from his shirt to bind the wound, working carefully but efficiently. Ahioka watched him, feeling gratitude and respect for the cowboy who had risked everything to save her. They rested for a moment, listening to the distant crackle of the fire. The desert was alive with danger, but it was also alive with life. Birds called from the cliffs, and the wind whispered through the rocks. Luke and Ioka shared a quiet understanding. They had faced the fire, the snakes, and the threat of death together and survived. This experience had created a bond between them, built on trust, courage, and determination. Luke looked at the canyon, planning their next steps. The fire was spreading, and they could not stay here for long. Ahioka's herbs were still in her basket, but survival came first. Luke encouraged her to focus on breathing and resting briefly before they continued. Each second counted, and they had to be ready to move again if the fire threatened their new path. Despite the danger, there was a quiet satisfaction in surviving such a challenge. They had faced death and emerged alive, their skills and courage tested to the limit. Ahioka adjusted her grip on the basket, knowing that Luke was right. Survival came first. She felt a strange connection to the cowboy who had guided her through the fire, and a respect for his courage and knowledge of the desert. Luke felt a similar connection, admiring her bravery, intelligence, and determination.
Fire had brought them together, showing them the strength they could find in each other.
Together, they were ready to face the next challenge, whatever it might be. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the heat of the desert pressed down on them. Smoke still rose in the distance, reminding them that danger was never far.
Luke guided Thunder to a more open area where they could catch their breath and plan the next move.
Ahioka's ankle still throbbed, but the immediate danger had passed. They had survived the first part of the deadly race, but they both knew that more challenges awaited. The desert was unpredictable, and the fire could shift at any moment. They stayed together, ready for whatever came next. A bond they had formed during the terrifying ride through fire and snakes was unspoken but strong. Luke's eyes scanned the canyon, and Ahioka stayed close, trusting him completely. They had faced death together, and that experience had changed them. Both knew that courage, skill, and trust were their greatest weapons in the desert. And as they prepared to move again, they knew that survival depended on staying alert, working together, and never underestimating the wild and unpredictable land they called home. The fire burned hotter now, and the smoke had grown thick, making the air heavy and hard to breathe. Luke Harper could feel the heat on his face, stinging his eyes, but he pushed forward, keeping his focus sharp. Thunder, his strong chestnut horse, moved carefully over the rocky terrain, snorting and shifting its weight as it felt the danger around them. Luke could hear the crackle of flames nearby, and he knew that they could not stop for long. Every moment of hesitation could allow the fire to trap them, and every step carried the risk of a snake hidden in the dry desert brush. He glanced back at Ahioka, who rode close behind, gripping her basket tightly and biting her lip in determination. Her ankle still throbbed from the snake bite, but she had not cried out. She was brave, and Luke respected her courage deeply. The canyon they were moving through was narrow, with steep rocks on either side. Flames danced along the edges, flicking toward the dry grass and small shrubs. Smoke twisted and curled around them, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Luke's eyes narrowed as he scanned the path, guiding Thunder carefully. He knew there were snakes and other dangers hidden in the grass, moving quickly to escape the fire. One wrong step could be fatal. He whispered to Thunder, calming the horse as they weaved between rocks and burning patches of ground. Every sound of the fire, every hiss of a snake, made his heart race, but he kept his focus on moving forward.
Ahioka held on tightly, feeling the heat pressing against her back.
Her mind raced, but she did not panic. She trusted Luke completely. His calm presence gave her strength, and she used that strength to steady herself as Thunder leaped over small rocks and avoided hidden snakes. She could see the flames growing higher ahead, and the smoke thickening. But she reminded herself that survival depended on courage and focus. The herbs in her basket were forgotten for the moment.
Life came first.
She knew that if they did not make it out alive, no medicine would matter. Suddenly, a snake lunged from the grass, its fangs flashing in the light of the flames. Luke reacted immediately, nudging Thunder to the side and shifting his weight to protect Ayoka. Thunder jumped over a small rock, narrowly avoiding the strike, and Luke whispered a sharp command, keeping both the horse and Ayoka safe. The fire roared louder, sending sparks into the air, and smoke burned their lungs. But Luke did not falter. He had faced danger before, but this was unlike anything he had ever seen. The fire was alive, unpredictable, and fast, and the snakes moved quickly, adding another layer of danger. Every second was a test of courage and skill. Ayoka gasped as a small branch fell nearby, catching fire instantly. She instinctively ducked, holding on tightly to Luke and Thunder. He guided the horse around the burning debris, moving with a careful urgency. The canyon twisted and turned, and each bend brought a new challenge. A narrow path, a fallen rock, a snake slithering too close. Luke's heart pounded, but he focused on the path ahead, using every ounce of experience to keep them safe.
Ayoka followed his lead, trusting him completely.
They moved as one, horse and riders, navigating the dangerous landscape with precision and courage. As they advanced, Luke noticed the smoke growing darker, the flames higher. He realized that some parts of the canyon were burning faster than he had expected. He needed to act quickly.
Hold on tight, he called to Ayoka. We're going to take a shortcut through a narrow pass. It's risky, but it's our fastest way out. Ayoka nodded, her eyes wide but determined.
She knew that trust was the only way forward. Thunder shifted its weight, ready to move through the tight space, and Luke guided them carefully, making sure they avoided the burning branches and sharp rocks. Every step was a careful calculation, every movement a balance between speed and safety.
A sudden hiss caught their attention.
The large rattlesnake had slithered into their path, its fangs bared and ready to strike. Luke reacted instantly, using a branch to push it aside while keeping Thunder steady. The horse jumped over a fallen log, narrowly avoiding another snake hiding in the grass. Ayoka's heart raced, but she stayed calm, moving in rhythm with Luke and the horse. They were surrounded by danger on all sides, the fire, the snakes, the smoke, and the heat, but they were alive, moving forward, relying on courage, trust, and skill. The narrow pass was a challenge. Rocks jutted out on either side, and flames licked at the edges, sending sparks into the air. Luke guided Thunder carefully, whispering instructions to Ayoka. She leaned close, keeping her balance and holding on to the horse. The heat was intense, and smoke burned their eyes, but they pushed forward. Each step brought them closer to safety, but the risk was still high. Luke knew that a single misstep could lead to disaster, and he focused every thought on guiding them through. Suddenly, Ayoka stumbled slightly, her foot catching on a rock.
She cried out as pain shot through her ankle, still swollen from the earlier snake bite. Luke reacted instantly, steadying her and urging Thunder forward.
"You're okay," he said firmly. "Just hold on."
Breaths.
We're almost through. Ayoka nodded, gritting her teeth against the pain.
Breaths. She trusted Luke completely, and that trust gave her strength. Thunder moved carefully but quickly, leaping over rocks and avoiding snakes as Luke guided them through the dangerous path.
As they emerged from the narrow pass, they found themselves in a slightly wider clearing. Flames still burned around them, but the immediate danger of the tight rocks had passed.
Luke dismounted quickly, helping Ayoka down from Thunder. Her ankle throbbed, but she was alive. Luke examined it carefully, using a clean cloth to wrap the wound and prevent further venom from spreading. He worked quickly but calmly, showing skill and experience. Hyoka watched him, feeling gratitude and admiration for the cowboy who had risked everything to save her. They rested for a moment, listening to the crackle of the fire and the hiss of snakes fleeing the heat. Luke could see that the fire was spreading in the distance, but for now they were safe. Hyoka adjusted her basket of herbs, grateful that they had survived the worst of the danger. Luke looked at her, seeing her bravery and determination.
You did well, he said quietly. It's not easy to stay calm in a place like this. Hyoka nodded, smiling faintly despite the pain.
I had no choice, she replied. I had to trust you.
Luke smiled slightly, appreciating her words. They had faced a deadly race together, through fire and venom, and survived. But he knew that their journey was not over. The fire was still out there, unpredictable and dangerous, and they needed to find a safe path back to the settlement and to Ahioka's people. He guided Thunder forward, helping Ahioka climb back onto the horse. The heat still pressed against them, and smoke filled the air, but they moved with determination, each step bringing them closer to safety. As they rode through the desert, the sun climbed higher, making the heat even more intense. Luke kept a careful eye on the path ahead, scanning for snakes, falling branches, and other hazards. Ahioka stayed close, trusting him completely. They moved as one, united by courage and necessity. The fire roared in the distance, a constant reminder of the danger they had faced and the challenges still ahead, but they were alive, and that was what mattered. Luke thought about the desert, the fire, and the snakes. He had faced many dangers in his life, but this had been different. The fire had forced them to move quickly, to make split-second decisions, and to trust in each other completely. Ahioka's courage had been remarkable, and her trust had given him strength. Together, they had survived what could have been a deadly situation. The desert had tested them, and they had passed. By late morning, the smoke had begun to thin slightly, though the fire still burned in the distance. Luke and Ahioka moved carefully, guiding Thunder along safe paths and avoiding hazards. Hyoka's ankle still throbbed, but she stayed strong, riding with determination and courage.
Luke's eyes scanned the horizon, planning the safest route to reach the settlement and her people.
Every step mattered, and every decision could mean the difference between safety and danger. Finally, they reached a small, rocky outcrop where they could rest safely for a few moments. Luke dismounted, helping Ahioka down. She winced slightly from the pain in her ankle, but she smiled faintly, grateful for his help. Luke inspected the path they had traveled, noting the danger they had overcome. They had faced fire, venomous snakes, and the unpredictable desert, and had survived. The experience had bonded them in a way that words could not describe. As they rested, Luke spoke quietly to Ahioka. "We've made it this far, but we can't stay here too long. We need to find a safe way back." Ahioka nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. She trusted him completely. They had faced death together and survived, and that trust would carry them forward. The desert was still dangerous, but they were stronger for what they had endured. Together they would continue their journey, relying on courage, skill, and the bond they had formed. Luke and Ahioka finally reached a small, flat clearing far enough from the flames and smoke that they could catch their breath. The desert around them was quiet, except for the faint crackle of fire in the distance and the occasional rustle of animals moving away from danger. Luke helped Ahioka dismount from Thunder carefully, supporting her as she stepped onto the rocky ground. Her ankle throbbed, but she smiled faintly, grateful that they had made it through the most dangerous part of the canyon. Luke could see the weariness in her eyes, but he also saw her courage shining through. She had faced
fire and venom, and had survived because of determination and trust. They sat together for a moment, letting Thunder graze nearby. The horse's chest heaved from the exertion, but it was calm. Sensing that the immediate danger had passed, Luke reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small canteen of water. He offered it to Ahyoka, who took a long, grateful drink. Then he drank himself, feeling the cool water soothe his parched throat. The desert sun was high in the sky now, hot and relentless. But for the first time in hours, they could pause and feel a small sense of relief. The fire was still burning behind them, but the path ahead seemed clearer.
Luke examined Ahyoka's ankle carefully. The snake bite was swollen, but he had applied his makeshift first aid well enough to slow the venom.
Bah. He cleaned the wound again with water and wrapped it securely with a cloth torn from his shirt.
"You'll be sore for a while," he said gently.
But it won't get worse if you rest and let it heal.
Ahyoka nodded, wincing slightly but staying strong. She looked at Luke with a mixture of gratitude and respect. He had risked his life to save hers, guiding her through the fire and danger without hesitation. She had never met anyone so calm, so skilled, and so brave in the face of disaster. After a few moments, Luke stood and scanned the horizon. The fire was still burning in the canyon, but the smoke had begun to thin, and the wind had shifted slightly, keeping the flames from spreading toward their clearing. "We need to keep moving," he said quietly.
We can't stay here too long. The fire could change direction, and we need to get to a safer place where the smoke won't reach us.
Ahyoka nodded, holding her basket of herbs carefully. She had learned the hard lesson that life in the desert required constant vigilance. Survival meant thinking ahead, trusting those around you, and being prepared for sudden danger. They mounted Thunder again, moving slowly at first to let Ahyoka's ankle adjust. Luke guided the horse along a path that avoided the still-burning areas and the patches of dry grass where snakes could hide. They moved cautiously but steadily, keeping an eye on the smoke and the terrain. Luke spoke quietly to Ahyoka, pointing out safe spots to step and warning her about loose rocks. She listened carefully, grateful for his guidance. The trust between them had grown stronger with each step. They were no longer just two people caught in danger. They were a team, relying on each other for survival. As they rode, Luke and Ahyoka noticed signs of life returning to the desert. Birds cautiously began to fly between the trees, and small animals peeked out from hiding places. The heat of the fire had scared many away, but the land was resilient. Luke felt a sense of hope. Nature could be dangerous, but it could also heal. Just as the desert had tested them, it would also recover, and so would they. Ahyoka glanced around, her eyes softening as she watched the small signs of life. She realized that survival was not just about escaping danger, it was about appreciating the strength and beauty of the world around her. After some time, they reached a small stream, the water clear and cool. Luke dismounted and helped Ahyoka down again. Narration. She lowered her basket and let her feet touch the water, wincing slightly from the snake bite, but feeling relief as the cool water eased the swelling. Luke knelt beside her, washing her ankle gently. "This will help," he said. "Nature has its way of healing too." Ahyoka nodded, feeling comforted by the simple act. It was a reminder that life continued, even after moments of fear and danger. They were alive, and that was something to be grateful for. While they rested, Luke looked around the area. It was secluded and safe for now, far from the fire and the snakes. The sun was beginning to lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the desert. Luke's thoughts wandered briefly to the people in the settlement and Ahyoka's tribe. They would worry about her, but Luke knew that for now, they had survived. The moment of danger had passed,
and all that mattered was staying safe and moving carefully.
He knew that bravery was not just about facing fire and snakes. It was about making the right choices and protecting those who could not protect themselves.
Ahayoko watched Luke quietly.
Best. She admired his strength, not just in facing danger, but in staying calm and thinking clearly. His courage had been inspiring, but so had his patience. He had guided her through the fire without panic, showing her how to stay safe and survive. She felt a sense of gratitude that went beyond words. The desert had tested them, but they had passed because of trust, skill, and determination. Ahayoko realized that courage was not the absence of fear. It was the ability to act despite fear, and she had witnessed it in Luke. After resting for a while, they prepared to continue. Luke guided Thunder to the edge of the stream, moving slowly to ensure Ahayoka's ankle could handle the ride. The desert stretched out before them, wide and open, with hills and valleys that would test their endurance. The path to her tribe and to the safety of the settlement would not be easy, but they were stronger for what they had endured. Ahayoka adjusted her grip on her basket and her hold on Luke, ready to continue the journey. Together, they moved forward, careful and determined. As they rode, Luke spoke quietly. "We've made it this far, but the desert is unpredictable. We need to stay alert and keep moving. Safety is ahead, but it won't come without caution." Ahayoka nodded, appreciating his words. She understood that survival required both courage and wisdom. The lessons of the desert were clear. Respect the land, trust those who help you, and never take life for granted. She felt a deep connection to Luke, formed not through words, but through shared experience and trust. They moved for hours, navigating the rocky hills and valleys carefully. The fire was still burning in the distance, but the smoke had begun to dissipate, giving them a clearer view of the path ahead. Birds sang cautiously from the trees, and the desert showed signs of life returning. Luke and Ahayoka felt a sense of relief, but they remained alert. The experience had taught them that danger could appear at any moment, and they could not afford to be careless. Every step required attention, every decision mattered, and together they were stronger than either could be alone. By late afternoon, they reached a small settlement on the edge of the desert. Luke guided Thunder into a safe area, and Ahayoka dismounted carefully. The people of the settlement were surprised to see them emerge from the wilderness, safe but exhausted. Luke explained briefly, keeping the story simple, and the settlers immediately offered help. Ahayoka's tribe arrived shortly after, their faces showing a mix of concern and relief. They had feared the worst, but now they could see that she was alive and relatively unharmed. The tribe approached cautiously, curious about the man who had risked his life to save one of their own. Luke remained quiet, letting Ahayoka speak if she wished. But she looked at him, a silent question in her eyes. Luke nodded slightly, giving her the space to explain what had happened.
She told her people about the fire, the snakes, and Luke's courage in guiding her through danger. The tribe listened carefully, and a sense of respect for Luke began to grow among them.
They had witnessed his bravery firsthand through Ahayoka's story. Luke did not boast or exaggerate. He let the truth of his actions speak for itself. As evening fell, Luke and Ahayoka sat quietly near the stream, reflecting on what had happened. The desert was calm now, the fire a distant glow on the horizon. They both felt a sense of gratitude for having survived, and a bond had formed that neither would forget. The experience had tested them, but it had also shown them the strength that came from trust, courage, and determination. They knew that life in the desert would continue to bring challenges, but they were prepared to face them together if needed.
Ahayoka looked at Luke, her eyes soft but strong.
"You saved my life," she said quietly. I will never forget that. Luke nodded, a faint smile on his lips.
Psst. We saved each other, he replied. It takes courage to survive, but it also takes trust. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and red. The fire had tested them, but they had emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected than before. As night fell, the desert grew quiet. Luke and Ahioka prepared to rest, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new hope. The fire was behind them, but the lessons they had learned would remain forever. Bravery, trust, and the courage to face danger head-on. Together they had survived the desert's deadly test, and together they were ready to face whatever came next. The next morning, the desert was calm and quiet. Breaths. The fire had burned itself out in some areas, leaving patches of blackened earth, but the wind had carried most of the smoke away. Luke Harper stood beside Thunder, stretching his stiff muscles from the long hours of riding. The sun was warm but not harsh yet, and the soft morning light made the desert seem almost peaceful after the chaos of the previous day. He glanced over at Ahioka, who was carefully tending to her ankle. The swelling had gone down slightly, thanks to the water and rest from yesterday. She moved slowly but steadily, adjusting her basket of herbs on her back. Luke had insisted on staying close until she was fully ready to travel. They had survived the fire and the snakes together, but he knew the journey back to her tribe and to the settlement was still not easy. The desert could be unpredictable, and he wanted to make sure Ahioka was completely safe before venturing out again. He offered her water and some bread he had brought, and she accepted quietly, her eyes showing gratitude. They had grown closer in the past day, connected by the shared experience of danger and survival, but neither spoke much. Words seemed unnecessary when their bond had been formed through action and trust. By mid-morning, Ahioka felt strong enough to continue.
Luke helped her mount Thunder carefully, keeping one hand on her ankle as she shifted into position.
Take it slow, he said, his voice calm but firm. We don't want any more surprises today. Ahioka nodded, gripping the horse tightly but with a new confidence. The sun climbed higher, but the heat felt manageable and the desert seemed to welcome them back to its quiet beauty. Luke led the way, carefully scanning the path ahead for rocks, snakes, or anything that could pose a threat. They moved steadily, their pace cautious but determined. As they traveled, Ahioka spoke quietly about the herbs she had collected and the ways they could help her people. She explained how each plant had a purpose, and Luke listened with genuine interest. It was a peaceful moment, a contrast to the chaos of the fire. For Luke, it was also a chance to appreciate Ahioka's knowledge and courage. She had faced danger without panic and had trusted him completely, even when the flames and snakes threatened their lives. He felt a sense of respect and admiration for her, and he knew she felt the same for him. Their shared ordeal had created a bond that was quiet but strong, built on trust, courage, and mutual respect. Hours passed as they made their way through the desert. The terrain varied, with rocky hills, sandy stretches, and small patches of grass. Luke guided Thunder carefully, and Ahioka followed, keeping her balance and adjusting her basket. They spoke occasionally, mostly about practical matters like the best path to take and how to avoid hazards. The quiet moments were just as important, giving them time to reflect on what had happened. They had faced fire and venom, had risked their lives, and had survived. That experience changed them, showing them the strength they could find in each other and in themselves. As they neared the edge of the desert, the settlement and Ahioka's tribe came into view. Luke could see the people gathered, watching the horizon for signs of her return. The sight filled both of them with relief. Ahioka's people had been worried, and the settlers had also likely feared the worst. But now, they could see that she was alive and well. Luke slowed Thunder, giving her time to adjust as they approached the group. The people came forward, offering smiles and helping hands. Beth, Ahioka dismounted carefully, and Luke stayed close, watching for any signs of danger. Her tribe gathered around, their faces filled with concern, relief, and respect. Ahioka explained briefly what had happened, describing the fire, the snakes, and how Luke had guided her to safety. The elders listened carefully, nodding in understanding and gratitude. Luke did not boast or exaggerate. He let Ahioka's words tell the story. Her people's respect for him grew as they realized the courage it took to ride through fire and face the dangers of the desert to save someone else. Luke felt a quiet satisfaction knowing he had done the right thing and that his actions had earned the trust of another community. After a moment, Luke stepped back and let Ahioka speak to her people more. She described the snakes, the smoke, the heat, and the way they had worked together to survive. She emphasized his courage and skill, and her words carried weight. The tribe nodded, showing that they understood the gravity of the situation and the bravery involved. Luke felt a quiet pride, not for himself, but for the fact that they had survived and that Ahioka's people now knew he was someone they could trust. It was a moment of connection and understanding between two different worlds, brought together by circumstance and courage. As the day continued, Luke helped Ahioka gather her herbs and secure them for her tribe. The fire had destroyed some areas, but the plants they had collected were safe. The elders thanked Luke again, offering him food and shelter as a gesture of gratitude. He accepted quietly, appreciating the kindness, but he knew he could not stay long. His life was in the desert, guiding horses and helping where needed. Still, the respect and gratitude from Ahioka's people left a lasting impression on him. He had risked his life, but he had also gained a bond that could not be broken. In the evening, Luke and Ahioka sat near a small fire, watching the sun set over the desert. The sky turned shades of red and orange, and the air was calm and still. They spoke quietly about what had happened, reflecting on the events of the past day. Both of them understood that life could change in an instant, that danger could appear without warning, and that survival required courage, trust, and quick thinking. They had faced fire and venom, and they had survived together. That experience had changed them, deepening their respect for the desert, for each other, and for the strength of human will. Ahioka looked at Luke and smiled faintly. "I will never forget what you did for me," she said quietly. "You risked your life to save mine."
Breaths.
I will always be grateful.
Luke nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "We survived because we trusted each other," he replied.
Courage is important, but so is trust. Without it, we wouldn't have made it. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling softly between them, each lost in thought. The desert was calm now, but they knew it would always carry danger and lessons for those who lived in it. As night fell, the stars appeared in the sky, bright and clear against the dark desert. Luke and Ahioka remained near the small fire, talking quietly about the future. Ahioka shared her hopes for her people, and Luke spoke about life in the desert and the challenges he had faced. Their conversation was gentle and meaningful, full of understanding and shared respect. They had survived a deadly race against fire and venom, and that experience had created a bond that was deeper than words. Both of them knew that their lives had been changed forever by the events of the past day. Before resting for the night, Luke and Ahioka prepared Thunder for a calm evening. The horse had been through a difficult journey as well, and they fed him and gave him water, patting him gently to reassure him. The desert night was cool now, a welcome change from the heat of the fire and sun. Luke and Ahioka sat quietly, reflecting on the lessons learned. They had seen how fragile life could be, but also how strong people could become when faced with danger. Courage, skill, and trust had been their guiding principles, and they had carried them safely through the worst of the desert's challenges. The next morning, Luke prepared to leave, knowing his path was back into the desert where he belonged.
Hyoka stood beside him, her ankle healed enough to walk without much pain. She adjusted her basket and looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and respect.
"Bet, thank you for everything," she said softly. "I will never forget you or what we went through." Luke nodded, tipping his hat slightly. "Stay strong," he replied. "The desert can be harsh, but you have courage and wisdom. That will carry you through anything." They said their goodbyes, each understanding that their paths might not cross again soon, but their bond would remain.
Luke mounted Thunder and rode back into the desert, moving with purpose and calm. Ahioka watched him go, feeling a sense of peace and gratitude.
They had survived a deadly fire, venomous snakes, and the unpredictability of the desert. But more than that, they had survived together, relying on courage, trust, and determination. The experience had changed them, strengthened them, and left a lasting mark on their lives. As Luke rode away, the sun rose higher, casting long shadows over the desert. He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing he had done the right thing and that someone's life had been saved. The desert stretched endlessly before him, full of challenges and beauty, and he was ready to face whatever came next. Ahioka returned to her people, safe and grateful, carrying the lessons of courage, trust, and the strength of human connection. The story of the cowboy who rode through fire to save an Apache woman would be remembered, not as a tale of danger alone, but as a testament to bravery, compassion, and the bonds that form when people face life and death together.